again, are you a press release carbon reducer or are you a material carbon reducer?
Yeah.
Landline is a way to be a material carbon reducer today. No exceptions.
This is the Time on Wing podcast. Welcome back. I'm Courtney Miller with Visual Approach Analytics. With me, as always, Garrick Deschavant of Collateral Verifications. Garrick, who are we talking to today?
So today we have another fantastic guest. We have David Sunde, who is the current CEO of the Landline company. And for those of you that haven't heard of the Landline company, you should definitely look it up because it's a pretty cool little company that is doing something that a lot of others aren't. It's pretty innovative. But so David has also worked, he was a director and advisor for Surf Air, which is also pretty cool. He was in network planning and strategy at Alaska Airlines. He was an analyst for Seabury Group. He was in network strategy and operations research consultant for Surf Air prior to that as well. He did network planning for United Airlines. He was in operations research for American Airlines. And he also has BS in management, science and engineering from Stanford University. So David, this is your time on wing.
Just a quick intermission before we continue with the show. We do get a lot of questions about how our listeners can support the show. And frankly, the easiest way is to continue the spirit of the show, which is just to reach out to us at conferences. But we also run businesses as well. And you can support us by supporting a lot of the work that we do. You can support the work that I do through Visual Approach by visiting visualapproach.io, where we produce a lot of research and analysis, a lot of data visualizations.
From my side, obviously, I focus more on the metals. So anything that's aircraft related, if you're looking for valuations, whether it's on aircraft engines, I'm happy to help with any of those types of projects. So we appreciate certainly the opportunities to work with all of you. And we certainly also appreciate just the fact that people are willing to listen to what we have to say and enjoy kind of our thoughts and takes on what we think is a fascinating industry. So thank you.
Okay, back to the show.
So, David, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you on, and we're certainly looking forward to kind of hearing all about what you're doing and what your thoughts are on the industry and everything else. But as with everybody else, we definitely want to know kind of where you got your start, right? Where did aviation come from? I mean, obviously you're very much tied to aviation with everything that you're doing today, but you've got a great background as well. So we'd love to hear how you got started.
Yeah, well, thank you both for having me on. Really appreciate it. I'm a regular listener, so always enjoy the content you guys produce, and feel very lucky to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe like some of your other guests, like I, can't remember a time in my life where I wasn't obsessed with airplanes. Probably a common theme. Just born with some sort of desire to just be around aviation. My childhood reading was like the Jane's anthology of
Nice.
Aircraft.
Nice.
I don't know who Jane is, but she's killing it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Jane had a tough day when Google came out, and Wikipedia's been I think tough for Jane's business, but
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up in Houston, and our local sports store had a brick and mortar Continental Airlines ticket desk, if you remember those. And for me, like going to the ticket office and getting the updated schedule book was like a big deal.
You're another one of those. Yeah.
I've got a box in my garage, Garrick. It's old timetables. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to learn that it was like impolite to correct people when they told you like about their recent vacation, and they're like, "Yeah, I think I flew American," and I'd be like, "It doesn't sound like you did, based on where you connected." So
that's great.
That was kind of my childhood, and just it never left me. Always obsessed. And when I got to college, I was really lucky and got an internship at American Airlines after my sophomore year at school, and it just confirmed, everything I guess I always knew, that it was the coolest business I'd ever been around, and I loved every part of it. I think uh, what's always fascinated me about aviation, I do love airplanes, but just the
Yeah.
complexities, the engineering, the math, the science that goes on like behind the scenes, from revenue management to like the actual engineering of the aircraft and how that all intersects in a way to create a business is just always been fascinating to me. And I feel like there's an old airline CEO, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was like it might have been Smizek, I can't remember, but there's an old saying that's like if you like the business of doing business, there is no business like the airline business.
Huh. That's cool.
And I
Hmm.
thought that was so accurate. I mean, maybe you guys have had the same experience.
Hmm.
There's just so there's it touches everything, and it never ceases to kind of appetize a curious person. And so that's where it all started.
Yeah, until we start interstellar travel, like this is the coolest thing, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's everywhere. Now, I'm totally in when we start doing interstellar. I don't know where we'll go to,
yeah,
um, but that's kind of. I mean, if you think of like the railroads, which are cool as hell, like I love trains, but they're not airplanes, right? It's not
Right.
global. It's not.
right,
Yeah.
right. I've adopted buses, as you know, and buses have their own interesting complexities, and I think the economics of ground transportation and all that stuff is interesting. But yeah, there is nothing more alluring, right, than just being at the end of LAX at Imperial Beach and watching like the blast off to Asia in the middle of the day, and thinking about all the work and all the coordination it took to make that departure happen on time and make money. There's just so many components of the business that fascinate me. So I was super lucky in that my first summer at American, I had a manager that I think understood my obsession and very fortunately, helped me get connected with people all over the business, learn a ton. I also was working in operations research for revenue management, and
Whew, that's
I
heavy.
lacked I lacked a PhD at the time, and I still lack a PhD. So I think my utility as a 20-year-old was probably relatively limited, other than like providing timely coffee service and
Yeah.
like a lot of enthusiasm in Monday team meetings. And so
But but
I was lucky.
so operations research
Yeah,
in RM.
yeah,
That I don't. I'm sure that title still exists, but it's
yeah,
more like they now call this like the data science team.
yeah. Today this would be data science or AI or like whatever you want to call it, but yeah, the idea is like calibrating the math behind calibrating the demand forecast, understanding booking curves better. I think and this was 2011, and the kind of interesting topics at the time were all about discrete choice models and truly continuous pricing. And I haven't really been in that world for a long time, but I thought it was interesting. I went to a conference maybe 6 years ago now, called Agifors, and those were still topics people were trying to figure
Yep.
out. And I think maybe finally the computing and the data has caught up. I actually don't really know anymore. But at the time, yeah, it was super interesting and cutting edge. American, I think, has always historically had a very large OR presence, specifically for RM. One of the many things that they were first in. And it was just, yeah, for me, it was the best introduction to the airline business I ever could have wanted, and I'm incredibly, incredibly thankful for it.
Yeah. That's really cool. And I think that's, I think that's something that's lost a little bit in terms of, because when you think about an airline, right, you don't necessarily think that deep in terms of what they do, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to, I think if you want to be a successful airline, you have to have that capability to understand, especially when you're somebody like an American or a Delta or United, right? Some of the major airlines, right? You have to be able to get that understanding to be able to get it right or try to get it right. And the fascinating thing is that they still sometimes don't get it right, right? So
It
even with
is
all that,
right.
there's still mishaps, but that's something that you don't necessarily hear about. Like you don't. I mean, I've never. I don't think I've ever remembered going to a conference and somebody talking about that at a conference, right? I guess that doesn't
It's one of those
make it
things where
in. Yeah.
if it's done really well, you never know it exists, you know? If
Yeah.
and I think nowadays it exists all over the place, and sort of the industrial engineering framework for solving problems is appropriate in a lot of different parts of the airline business, you know, from maintenance and engineering to the operations and control center. But yeah, it's also understanding your customer better. And it's probably one of those things where, as much as I love the bus business, you know, I wish I did a better job kind of keeping on the frontier of how all the change in kind of computing power in the last decade has impacted the ability to implement a lot of those ideas that have been around for a long time. You know, you look at like the United's Connection Saver or any of the interesting things that are going on in the operations control centers at these airlines, and you just want to peel back the like what's going on behind the app. Like I'd love to actually just see the math, you know what I mean? Like I would, you know, love to understand how these things work, how they're deployed in a scalable way. And especially on the operations side, you know, how much human intervention is still there. I think I just based on the people I know and you know friends have a probably better understanding of how people focused RM still is. But on the operations side, you know, to your point, Garrick, you don't even think about when a storm's over DFW, all the crazy stuff going on somewhere, all the crazy math involved,
Hmm.
all the thought people have put into trying to find the best solution. And if you're a you know curious person or I guess a nerd like myself, you want to find a way to put yourself in those rooms and figure out just to learn how it all
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Well, who was it? Who was the great philosopher who said everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face? Was that Mike Tyson?
I think it was yeah. Mike, Mike
Right,
is
but that's
Tysonist.
like that's irregular ops, right?
Yeah.
Like you can plan
Yeah.
and plan and plan, and then
Right.
there's a storm over DFW, or there's a storm over Atlanta, which we call a Tuesday, right? I mean, and then what do you do? And then it comes down to the people. Now you have the blueprints and
Right.
but I would argue just as important, those blueprints, as important as they are, it's the experience of the people who are actually pushing and pulling and moving. I mean, we saw you know, the crew scheduling challenges at Southwest last year, and you know, a lot of the things you start to hear. While yes, there was the software side, so it was that planning side that ultimately
Right.
or that originally failed. Then you had issues of you only have so many people to answer the phone, so you had way more crew members than you have crew scheduling, right? So it's that human component is still very, very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful.
It is. Yeah. And I think it's as the consumer, right? All you hear is, oh, my flight's either delayed or canceled, and you can't help me get to where I need to be, right? There's nobody that's thinking like, oh my God, like I know you guys are really trying to figure out how to best accommodate everybody all at once, which is an impossible task. But I know
Right.
you're working on it. Everybody's going, you're doing nothing. You're doing absolutely all I want to go home, and you're telling me that there's nothing you can do, right? And that's all people see. And they
Right.
just get the frustration, but they know nothing about what goes on in the background, which kind of surprises me that, like, as an airline, you wouldn't want to be like, look, here's all the things that we have going on in the background to try and get you from point A to point B. And if anything happens, like, we're working hard rather than, because, you know, maybe just people wouldn't get it, but at least you would kind of go, oh, so it's not just kind of somebody at the front desk that's like, you know, going to pretend like they're typing on the keyboard. And then they're going to go, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you, or I can't only get you there 3 days from now. Like, no, it's not just that, right?
I think
So
it's
your
interesting that-
tactic, Eric, your tactic of saying, "Don't you know who I am?" Like, doesn't work.
that doesn't work.
No, it
Yeah.
doesn't. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm a 1K. Don't you know who I am?
that's right. Yeah.
Congratulations, sir. Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny. I have to, you know, like on a recent United flight, I actually was pretty impressed. Like the delay code was, or the delay information was, like we're waiting for other people to make their connection, and basically like we'll do this for you someday. Like you know,
That's
pay
impressive
it
and
forward.
smart.
And I was like, man, you know, I'm total. That's fine. That makes
Yep.
a lot of sense to me. Like, and I appreciate that. And I know that you know I've had tight connections before where probably Connection Saver did save me. In fact, I had a recent connection where I got a different text message that said, "Don't worry, we aren't waiting for you," which
That's so good.
I thought that was really good. And it's all, I think the tricky part about all these problems is they all tie back to what you were saying, Courtney. It's like, how does the automation work with the people?
Yeah.
And then I'm sure you've experienced this just based on what you spent the last few years doing. How is the data organized, and is it accessible enough that that text message can be sent to me at the right time, you know, in the right location with the right information, and not just to me, but the other, you know, 2,000 people in the bank who are also having the same experience.
All right, let me play devil's advocate here.
Please.
So you get a text. Let's
Yeah.
look at this from the airline's perspective. You get a text from the airline that says, "Hey, don't worry, you've got a tight connection. You're waiting for it. We're waiting for you." From
Right.
an airline perspective, I'm like, do I really want to let them know that they can kind of take their time? Or do I want
Yeah.
to send them a text and be like, you better hurry your ass up because this airplane's about to leave?
It was interesting. I think that I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was something to the effect of like, "Don't worry, we're not going anywhere, but also please don't make any stops along the way." Like, let's,
Yeah.
Don't make these
No.
people wait. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
yeah. This
Yeah.
isn't your invitation to go to Chili's too and have like a time. So,
Yeah.
but I was so impressed. I like, wow, that gives me so much, especially in Denver, where you might end up walking from like, you know, B18 to like the other side of A. It's like a mile and a half. You're like, this could be a while. But yeah, all that stuff is so interesting, and it sounds like you guys are the same way. Like when I'm in traveling and I have an experience like that, you always find yourself kind of daydreaming, like, how did that message arrive in my inbox? Like, what are the things going on behind the scenes here?
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it comes back to the kind of software engineering and the math in the background, and getting to learn that in a very, very small way at age 20 was really super interesting to me. But more importantly, like getting to actually just spend a summer at an airline, discover the bliss of non-revenue travel, and just know that, man, this is what I should be doing. I can't tell you. I remember going back to college and talking to other friends who are like looking for jobs, and the idea that you know exactly what you want to do,
Mhm.
and you're actually confident that it's like what you love is it's a rare privilege, especially at age 20. And I felt so lucky. I was like, this is it. I don't know exactly where this is going to take me. There's a lot within this space I could do, but I know this is what it's going to be for me. And if you allow me to say that buses are now part of the airline industry,
that's
I
very-
pretty much stayed true to that for the last decade of my life.
Yeah. And
So-
that's a great question, right? To kind of go, because when I look at your background, right, which is so airline focused,
Yeah.
how did you go from, okay, no, I just want to work for an airline,
Yeah.
to, well, maybe I should just start my own thing with buses? Like what was the thinking there, right? And I think Courtney knows how that got started, but
Yeah.
that to me is fascinating. How you make that kind of switch to go in that direction.
Garrick, there's a lot of little steps before you jump off a cliff like that.
Oh, I'm sure there are. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think I always had an entrepreneurial sort of interest. I always wanted to start my own business from a young age, and like most kids that love aviation, dreamed of starting my own airline, um, and always wanted to do something. I just thought that the idea that you could create something from scratch that was your own was so appealing to me. And I think when I left college and I went to go work at Seabury and then subsequently Alaska, I was just like, most kids that age, you're just trying to like figure out like, how do I fit in this world? What do I really want to do? And I found myself just kind of continuously in my spare time, like, opening up Excel and just like mapping out insane ideas, and probably most of them dumb, but just the exercise of like, I'm gonna sit down for a few hours and just build this model of this idea I have to see if it's even possible. That was like the most fun part of my day, no matter what I was doing. That's the thing I love the most. And I had, this is a long winding story, Garrick. So you opened up a
No,
can.
that's
We're
it's
in the
okay. I
Pandora's
asked the
box
question.
has been opened.
I asked the question.
I should have talked about myself for a while. If that's cool. So I just love that part of my job, or not my job, just as like my hobby, and I had the privilege of getting to work at this company called Surf Air when I was in college. I wrote my I was sitting in class one day and I like read about it and I cold emailed the founder, uh, like basically offering my extremely limited expertise, having 90 days of airline revenue management experience under my belt. I felt like I could make a big contribution. But one summer before I worked at United, I just went down to Santa Monica and like camped out on a friend's sofa and just like existed at Surf Air when it was like 4 people in a garage because I wanted to just see like what does it mean to like start your own thing? What does that look like? And it's not super glamorous, right? It's like a desk, an empty warehouse, and like a lot of big ideas and a lot of big problems. And I was like completely captivated. To me, that looked like the ideal way to spend your time. So spent a lot of time with them my senior year of college, writing essentially my senior thesis with the company, and maybe didn't quite have the guts to after school to just take the plunge. Surf Air at that time had some seed funding, or maybe had raised to Series A, but I had all the desire, but not quite the confidence to be like, I'm going to do this. So went and did other stuff for a couple of years, learned a ton, hopefully got way better at network planning, and gained a lot of new appreciation for the industry. And then after a couple of years, Surf Air had raised a considerable amount of money, was looking to grow their network planning team, and had hired a professional industry CEO named Jeff Potter, who I think like found my senior thesis, like sitting in a like under a cups of coffee somewhere, and was like, this is kind of interesting, and reached out to me, and I ended up joining to lead network planning, um, and I think it was like my advice to anybody I talk to, sort of coming from a more corporate background who wants to start a company, is like you need to go to school for that.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is when you're at a large corporation, everything is abstracted for you. Like, so you build your information packet, you send it to someone else who accepts it, given these parameters, and then can do their job, and then they send that packet. Everything is abstracted. So like, that maintenance exists, but you have no idea how and why,
Yeah.
that the plane needs to be in wherever for these check intervals. What happens during those check intervals, someone else's problem. And I think when you want to take a step to start a company, what's important is getting underneath that abstraction, and experiencing what it's like to set it all up for the first time. And when there is no blueprint and there is no right way of doing things, you have to use your own judgment. And likely you have no, like real data or facts or information to back up on it. So for me, like Surf Air was that. It was the best possible version of that I could have gotten. We were growing a lot. We were trying to figure ourselves out. The business model it was unclear what worked and what didn't work, but we knew customers loved it. And I think, the other benefit of being at a company in that phase, whether or not it's doing well or poorly financially, is that if you just put your hand up, you're going to get the opportunity to do a lot of stuff. So by the time I left Surf Air, I was still doing network planning, but I was running our SOC. I, was like doing all the maintenance planning. I was doing the crew planning. I was doing the fuel vendor management stuff I had absolutely no business doing, and I'm not even claiming to say I did it well, but I learned the process of being like, I don't really know how this works. No one's probably going to help me learn, but I'm not gonna figure it out by embarrassing myself a few times, and I'm just gonna try to get better. And I'm gonna be okay with the idea that this is kind of a chaotic environment where things are really uncertain. And I'd say that like from a sort of business preparation perspective, or just I guess personal preparation perspective, I needed that to be able to have the confidence to be like, you know what, I've got a few ideas of my own. I've been at home with my Excel sheets or on runs, dreaming, looking off into the ocean, dreaming about the company
As
I'm
one
going to start.
should, as one
As
should,
one
by the
does,
way.
yeah.
I mean,
And I think I can do this. And I've learned how to talk to investors. I've learned how to deal with vendors, all this stuff that it's I'm not saying you can't do it, and certainly there's been plenty of people that have left great jobs at big companies to start companies. But for me, that transition, the learning, the people I met at Surf Air, many of whom I'm still very close with today, that was like a master's degree in how to start a company. And that gave me the confidence to start thinking about some ideas I had a lot more seriously. And Surf Air's, I think it, working at Surf Air too, I want to be clear, was like so much fun. I mean, at the time, it's changed now, kind of what they're doing, but
I mean,
uh,
look, let's be fair here. It's not called work air; it's called surf air. Like
exactly,
it should be.
every day was a breeze. Exactly. So, um, but for Landline, I think the other thing Surf Air gave me is just a very early exposure to the pilot hiring environment. And this was probably 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So the pilot shortage was this theoretical idea that everyone said was going to happen later, but we were seeing it firsthand. Um, and it also, I think it teaches you a lot about what people really care about, or I learned a lot about what people really care about. I always used to joke with the chairman of Surf Air, a good friend of mine. We flew these beautiful PC-12s from small airports without that were non-sterile, and I love the PC-12. If I were gonna pick an airplane, like that'd be the one for me, I think. But you would watch the customers show up to board a surf airplane, and none of them, other than me, none of them knew what a PC-12 was. They were there for the airport experience. They didn't care at all what they were getting on, as long as it was on time, and as long as it was comfortable enough. And so I had a lot of thoughts about the pilot shortage. I had this kind of insight that people will try a lot of different travel experiences as long as it gets them a better airport experience. And then I'd spend a lot of time in network planning, uh, talking to small markets that are never going to get service, not because they're not good ideas, but because there wasn't the equipment type that had the cost structure to make the kind of opportunity cost of using that airplane worth it. And it felt to me like once Courtney left Bombardier, there was no hope for a next gen turboprop in the next.
Yeah, sorry, I blew it. I
like,
lost those blueprints too.
I was hopeless. I was like, what's going to replace the sub 76C jet category? Nothing. And so all those little things, I think inspired me. I thought about them a lot. I left my job at Surf Air really with no plan, honestly, with a couple different ideas. One that was a little bit more oriented towards using those same sort of set of assumptions on the network planning side, from like a data and modeling perspective. And then one was, man, like I know that airlines have used buses before. I like called some charter bus companies. The trip cost seems absolutely insane, to me for 50 seats. And I wonder, basically just leaving with the thought, I wonder why this isn't more common. And then, took a year of my life basically to answer that question.
Hmm.
And I think like maybe that's the other thing that I think is important in entrepreneurship is, just spending time following the thread of a thought and figuring out where it takes you and getting the confidence to be like, this is actually, I can't find the reason why this doesn't exist other than nobody's done it. So that's a good opportunity for me. And that all kind of happened around 2017, 2018, and Landline was started in June of 2018.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this is what I think, just to kind of jump ahead a little bit, this is what I think a lot of people don't really understand about Landline.
Yeah.
These are airline guys
Right.
running a bus company. I mean, to way oversimplify it here, right? This is not Megabus being like, yeah, we're pulling up to the airport too. No, this is airline centric. Like
That's
I am really hard pressed to find a bigger airline nerd than you, Sunday.
Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know you'll take that for the compliment it is.
Is that my one compliment? Yeah.
Yeah, that's your one. That's all
There you go.
So walk us through. I really want to walk us through Landline concept, kind of how it's evolved, whatever. Just go.
So I think what you said is really interesting. I have to walk this line carefully because our product today is amazing and the bus itself is amazing, but Landline was never started with the idea of like my business partner Ben's like love of buses or just some sort of desire to do something in ground transportation. It comes from a very sort of, I guess, mathematical understanding of network planning as a series of, you're building a hub and you're trying to build cost arcs that are as low, as basically as efficient as possible. And really a hub comes down to what's your cost of production, bringing people in to make a connection. And so we arrived at the bus, not because we love buses, but because we were simply taking the assumption from Surfair that says if you have a great experience, people don't really care what they're actually sitting on, unless you're like me and you check every time. And so if you hold that as a truth, then what's the lowest cost per seat we can possibly find? That's how it started. And if the answer had been, I don't know, a blimp, like that would have been the equipment type that Landline used. Like it was purely a thought process of we want to be able to connect people from 50 to 200 miles for the lowest cost possible in something that they'll still do. Literally, I started Landline with, my closest friend in the world, Ben Munson. And
which, by the way, Ben has a deep airline network planning background as well, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Equally, is very similar story. And had a lot more experience than I did actually running airline operations. And, I guess another piece of advice if you're thinking about starting a company is it's way more fun to do it with somebody else. We have a great partnership and, it's been a lot of fun over the years figuring this out. But yeah, we're both network planners. They're just like, what's the lowest cost per seat? And then that happened to be a bus. Like we would just call these party bus companies and ask for, what's Oxnard LAX? Like give us pricing for Bakersfield LAX. Like I was living in LA at the time, and you get the numbers back and you're like, this is like 90% lower than this. This is 56 seats for an order of magnitude less.
Yeah.
Than a regional jet.
Yeah. And I love how you said party bus, by the way. That was great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You got the pole, you got the lights, right? I mean, it's just, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
I'm right there with you. Right there.
And I remember being like pumped. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Like this fixes the whole thing, right? Because I think an important thing about Landline too is that our customer, like knowing who is actually sitting on that bus and what they're like, where they've come from is key. And we've learned over the years that it's 100% someone who used to drive themselves. And we can talk about this later, but there's always this conversation with Landline of like, should it be an airplane? Oh, are you going to take the airplane from the market? Or are these people who would have rather been on a regional jet? And I think Ben and I come at it from a very different perspective, which is like the market opportunity here is a set of cities that are too close to your hub to fly to cost effectively, but more importantly, are full of people driving themselves to the airport. Mm-hmm. And even if there is still air service, the air service is the tip top of the iceberg, and all the volume is driving. And the way that you get people off the road is with a lot of schedule frequency and a add-on to whatever the hub fare is that's competitive with parking. And because of the cost structure changes in regional aviation, that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe 25, 30 years ago, you could make money, adding on a couple bucks to a hub fare with an EMB 120. You can't do that anymore. And the whole picture, I think, in those early days just became so clear. Like this, if we can make this an equivalent experience, if we can demonstrate to airline partners that we're operating at a level of safety and security and on-time performance that they'd expect, this makes so much sense on paper. Different, taking something from paper to practice, very different story. A lot of learnings there, but yeah,
I got time. You got time, Garrick?
I got time. Yeah. We can learn. I want to learn stuff today.
I think, like Courtney, what I appreciate about your question is that I often tell people, I'm like, we're not tied to the bus forever. Like we don't think of ourselves as a bus company. We're a mobility company, primarily focused on taking people off the road on the way to the airport. The current tool we use to do that is a bus. There may be other tools in the future, but we're building this network that exists outside the airport to get people off the road, and we will always be sort of network planning, math thinkers first, not bus people first.
Right.
And if it makes sense to do something else in the future, we will. And I think when people understand that about me and Ben and our team, it makes it, I think, easier to understand that we're not, just trying to, I guess, be a new sales channel for Prevo, our bus company. Like this is a philosophical shift, and it's a product that exists not because it's a bus, but because it's the best way to get people in your network and not drive themselves.
Do you, when you talk to airlines, do you find that you have kind of a hurdle that you need to pass just to get them to realize that they're talking to airline people and not necessarily a bus company?
I would say that, a benefit of one of the things I love about this business, and I've heard other of your podcast guests say this, is that it's a small business and it's full of people that want to see you succeed. I think there's a big culture in the aviation of, helping the next man up or the next woman up. And I think I have benefited from that tremendously, having spent a decade of my career here. And so a lot of the people we were pitching early on were friends or people that, one of the two of us knew very well. And so they knew the level of, aviation obsession that was sitting in the room. However, there is still a huge hurdle rate of like, well, we're an airline and we operate airplanes. And I would say today, one of our biggest challenges still is this pervasive idea that I'm an airline first, and that's what I'm going to do. And I or I'm an airport, therefore I'm for airplanes. And I think I look at the world maybe a little differently and say, well, you're not an airline, you're a network. You're a network, you're of passenger flows. and adding more of flows is better for your whole network, whether or not it's on airplanes or not.
Right.
You're not an airline, you're a transportation company. I don't even know if this is like a good or a bad analogy because I don't want to compare people to packages. But if you just think about how crazy it would be if FedEx was like, hey, we'll get your package to the airport, getting it all the way to your
You
home,
pick it up.
like you're gonna have to work with a different company. You can go over here. Like someone's gonna have to actually come to the airport and handle it for you. Like the idea of end-to-end traffic flows is not new. I didn't invent that. It's getting someone who's been in the airline mindset for their entire career, thinking about airplanes, to think instead about networks and think about sort of equipment agnostic. How can I own more parts of someone's travel day spend? And how can I use like a new tool in my network to do that more effectively? That has been a big hurdle for us, continues to be a big hurdle for us, among others. And then I think like the perception of buses in the U.S. is not ideal. And so I think you do have to convince people that it's a different product that you take really seriously. The best honestly the best tool we have to do that is just like the vehicle itself because we outfit it really nicely, and we've done that many times where we just drive a vehicle down. I mean, Courtney,
All first
I'm,
class, right?
all first class. I'm sure
Okay.
you like. I think my job today is probably not too different than what it was like to work in Bombardier selling at that time the C series, um, which now is to I feel like I can say this because it's true. I wasn't an early believer. Unfortunately, I was an analyst, and so my ability to influence capex was in the single digit dollars. I mean, could I get you a new pencil? I could do that. Could I
I still
commit?
blame you every night before I go to bed.
Could I commit my carrier to buying CS 300s? I couldn't. Um, so I feel safe in saying that I was a huge advocate. But I think it's very similar. You're trying to prove that you're a serious company that does serious things
Mhm.
with a real asset that can make a difference at scale.
And
Yeah.
I mean, let's be fair. And then so much more, right? Because
Right.
you're talking about different modes of transportation. You're really kind of testing the paradigm
Correct.
of and I think you put it well. That paradigm, by the way, is not should I use buses? It's no, what are you? Are
Right.
you carrying an aluminum hammer looking for nails by way of airplanes, or
Right.
are you a transportation company
Right.
moving people to where they want to go? And I think what's so interesting about that is if you don't, those people still move. Like they still go.
Correct.
Either probably they go on your competitor, or like what you're finding out is they're just driving to where the airplanes are, especially as gauge goes up. So what
Correct.
if we actually offer the most cost effective way for you to be a transportation company? Like I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because um, I think the sort of behavior of people picking airlines when they're picking against other airlines, airport to airport, is pretty well understood. Everybody's network planning team is amazing at figuring that out. They can model it really well. But I think this coordinator from some work we've done together is what happens when they leave the airport or when they're booking at a place that doesn't have air service. Completely different. I think most people would assume that if you drive an hour from a major hub, the point of sale airline share will mirror the hub's seat share mix. So if carrier X has 40% of their hub and you drive an hour away, carrier X will also have 40% point of sale share. It's actually completely untrue. What happens when you get an hour away from a big hub is you revert to the industry
Mhm.
seat share. Um, and so if you have the ability to change that behavior um, in your catchment area, it's very incremental to you. But it's not really an intuitive idea, I think, if you're coming from the perspective of traditional airline network planning. Probably most people wouldn't guess that like that amount of drive difference can change people's loyalty so much.
I mean, a market's a market. My experience with network planning is, you know, you just think of a market as this homogenous group of people that happen to show up to your airplane, and I think
Right.
what you guys have found is that no, it's a collection of markets, right?
Correct.
Just different parts of the city for
Correct.
by one measure. But then what about all these other little markets that, by the way, are more and more important now as we're losing those small service, more people are driving. If you start to expand the range at which people will consider driving, you're touching other airports too. You're touching other
Exactly.
hubs. You're touching other LCC markets.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I mean,
think
look, I think your analogy about the boxes is fantastic, right? Because when I think about my own travel, right? If all I had to do was go, okay, so if I book this ticket here, all I need to do is drive my car here, get on a bus or
right.
whatever mode of transportation, and then the rest is taken care of for me, right?
Right.
That to me is like, yeah, because now you just go, all right, so I got to get up at this time. I got to drive to which airport am I going to? Am I going to LaGuardia? Am I going to JFK? Or how much time do I need? I got to find parking. Did I book? No, I didn't. Like
Right.
all these things go through your head. Whereas, from the airline standpoint, right? Why are they not thinking that way? To kind of go, yeah, why not make it easy for the consumer to just go, if I just book this through here, all I have to do is drive my car, whatever, 10, 15, 30 minutes, whatever it is to go to this
Right.
place. And then I get on there, and then the airline is taking care of me for the rest until I get to my destination. Right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you like the analogy. I feel like I'm already regretting comparing people to boxes, but
Yeah. No. I mean,
Yeah,
you need your
I'm sure
signature quote, and that could be mine.
exactly.
there you
right.
go. Look,
And like, if people
boxes
could
don't
put themselves in
complain.
boxes to travel, they probably would.
Boxes don't complain as much, but people don't catch on fire as much. So,
I,
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about all this is, for a long time we've been searching for like what's the unifying message or the unifying objective of Landline? Because I think the other thing we battle is it can be confusing. Are we trying to go to a place like Duluth and enhance air service? Are we trying to go to a place like Mankato that hasn't had air service in 25 years? Or are we trying to go to Breckenridge and build a station at the bottom of the ski lift and cater to premium people? Like, how do you sit here and say you're both going to like build a service for urban New York City, while also like driving out to a farm field, that had air service 25 years ago? What's the unifying theme? And I feel like the unifying theme is that the commonality here is that today all of those people drive themselves to the airport one way or the other. Either they're using rideshare, or they're driving themselves. And the more we can organize that market, the better for everybody. The better for the hub airport, the better for the spoke airport, the better for the security infrastructure, the better for the environment. But it's taken us a couple years, I think, to figure out really who we are, which is a company focused on removing personal car trips to the airport. And then if you take that as the truth, like kind of what the target markets look like and what we have to do effectively to actually be able to get people on the bus. And in a similar fashion, talking to airlines, it's difficult to go to an airline and pitch premium checkpoint in big city and city you might not remember that you used to fly to in the same conversation, unless you have this unifying message that's like, these people are spending money, they're traveling, during their travel day, they're spending money, none of that money is being processed through your platform. And I can give you a way, my team can give you a way that every dollar this person spends from their home to where they actually want to go is through your channel, is on your tickets, ticket stock or whatever you want to say. And to me, I think that's the most compelling idea, because what's in the world of ancillaries, like what's really left? Like what else can we charge people for? Probably nothing. Bag fees were transformational. It's like a couple $1 billion business in the United States. There's like $50 billion spent getting to and from the airport every year in the US. So we have a much bigger pool. We have a part of the travel day experience that needs to improve. And we have an ancillary product that actually I think would be net promoter score positive, not negative. And so it's, attacking each of those segments is a little bit different. But yeah, the common theme is people are spending money doing other stuff outside the airport. They're spending money to get to your flight. How can your brand control everything that goes on through the whole day? And what that requires is what we provide, which is the ability to exist in a space that either doesn't work for airplanes or can't work for airplanes.
Can we use Fort Collins, Denver as an example, just because it's one that I know you're very active on?
Yeah.
But could you just walk us through like the passenger experience for somebody who books a United ticket that includes a landline segment both to and from Fort Collins? Like, how is it different than what they would have otherwise, which is just driving to Denver?
Yeah, so I'll give you two experiences. I'll talk about Fort Collins, and we can talk about our American network in Philadelphia. So, what always happens is for any landline service connected to an airplane or to an airline, is you are purchasing that ticket as a connecting flight option with the airline that you want to fly on. So I'm sitting in Fort Collins. I want to go to New York City. I go to united.com. I type in FNL, which is the 3-letter code for Fort Collins. I type in EWR, as my destination or whatever my airport choice is, and I'm served a flight option selection screen that looks just like any one that you've ever seen before, and it has 2 flights, one from Fort Collins to Denver, one from Denver to New York City for one price. I purchased that. I earn miles for the whole trip. And when I show up to the Fort Collins, the Northern Colorado Regional Airport, there's basically like a little United station, if you will, staffed by our people, and we can tag your bag to its final destination. You board the vehicle with your boarding pass, your United boarding pass. We take you to Denver, and then you clear security and board your flight to New York. If you're going the opposite direction, so if you're landing in Denver and going to Fort Collins, we can actually pick you up at a gate in the B concourse, and your bag in both directions transfers seamlessly. But that's how it works. Last year, with our partners at American, we worked on a really exciting project that I think is pretty transformational, where we can actually carry you tarmac to tarmac in both directions. And so if you say are in Atlantic City, you want to go to come see me in Houston or go to LA, you book same booking experience on AA.com. You go to the airport in Atlantic City, you actually clear security, you get on a bus, and the bus takes you directly to the F concourse in Philadelphia. It's one of the coolest things. It's super cool. I have to tell you, like, I spent a lot of time thinking and working on this, and you'd think that by that time you wouldn't be like surprised. The first time I ever did this, when we pulled up to the gate at Philadelphia to be processed through to to the tarmac, to the concourse, I felt like it was magic happening. Like it feels. You get off the plane in the or you get off the bus in the F concourse, and you feel like you've like broken the rules. You're looking around, you're like, does everyone know? Is this okay?
Yeah.
Like, and all the customers, they're on the bus. They look around. They're like, did that really just did that just happen? It is
You're part of the cool club. It's like an exclusive club that allows you to go on the airport.
So cool. I mean, and it took a lot of work. So many like great people at American Landline and the TSA involved, and I think now to see how amazing the experience is, how much people like it, just could not be more appreciative for all that went into that experience, because it's game changing.
But think about like the implications of this are are mind-boggling, right? I mean,
Right.
you're connecting,
Right.
right? This is now just a ground-based flight. I say
Correct.
just, but it's a ground-based flight. But the concept of diversifying TSA, like you want to show up in Philly and go through the TSA, or by the way, we kind of have this remote I call it remote, but
Right.
this remote location, and just the passenger experience alone, based
Right.
on that, is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think from just like an infrastructure perspective too, right? When we had a more ultra short haul flying in ES, we used more of our airport infrastructure to process people. If you go back and look in like 2005, United actually flew Ontario LAX like 7 times a day, which is it's kind of crazy to think about on a 50-seat jet. And if you think about that from an infrastructure perspective for a second, like now in that context, Ontario is basically just an extra terminal for LA,
Yeah.
or an extra checkpoint, extra parking infrastructure. They used to fly Oxnard LA, they used to fly John Wayne LA, all this short haul capacity with a lot of with a lot of schedule density, all acting as kind of relief valves for LAX, which is one of the most constrained passenger experiences, or has been, in the U.S. And so, without even getting to the more fun and crazy ideas like building a checkpoint in a mall or whatever, if all we ever do is take all the infrastructure that exists today that's just not used, and put it back into play at high volume, right, at high network density. If you think about how kind of the math of a queue works, just taking that peak load off of a line is really what prevents it from hitting that kind of exponential growth in wait time. And that's what gets me super excited. You look at the number of places today, right? Even like Fort Collins is a great example. We serve it between 10 and 15 times a day now. You go up the road to Cheyenne or Laramie, and which are still on airplanes, and it's 1x or 2x a day. And so the amount of that point of origin that you can capture with 1 or 2x a day when you're competing against someone's car is just, it's very small. And those are just two examples. There's many. I could have picked many other places. The point I'm trying to make is Cheyenne is a TSA checkpoint that's staffed probably all day. Laramie is a TSA checkpoint that's probably staffed all day. Wenatchee is a TSA checkpoint that's probably staffed all day. And if it's not staffed all day, it's staffed out of Denver or Seattle by someone that could have been working in the main checkpoint. And so if we're going to staff the airport, let's figure out how to use that shift, that TSO screener shift, all day, not once a day, right? Like we don't have to come up with the idea of building an offsite checkpoint, because you basically already have one that's like already
They're
staffed,
everywhere.
already ready to go. They're all over the place, and that's to me that's super exciting. There's a lot of examples like that that exist across the U.S.
Now, which airlines are you working with today, kind of in this capacity?
Yeah, so the only airline we work with, behind security, so to speak, is American. We work with our total partnership portfolio is American, Air Canada, Sun Country, and United. And I think
That's no small list. Like we're not.
Right.
I mean, look, hey, no offense to your former employer, but Surfair is not. Right, we're not. When you say 4 carriers, it's not like Surfair and Silver and right. These are big carriers.
We're working with some small startups.
Awesome.
I'm just kidding. But and I don't
You
want
are the small startup.
yeah, yeah. We're working with this small startup carrier called United. They've got a few thousand.
Yeah. They're trying hard.
But I think the security model is really cool. I think there's stuff you can learn from the non-secure model. So Sun Country, we run a completely non-sterile network, and as partners, we've been incredibly effective at stimulating a lot of demand in kind of the Minneapolis catchment area, and doing things that I think people never thought were possible. We have a route from Fargo to Minneapolis, which is blocked at just under 4 hours, which works phenomenally well. And
4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah.
Sun Country was our first partner. Took a big risk on us. We worked with them through COVID, and I think throughout Landline's history, has always been really willing to help us experiment and let us learn. And really, learnings from that network have taught us a lot about our business model. But I don't think I would have said that 4 hours is possible when Ben and I started Landline, and it works great. And it works great because the math works. Like, we're able to, with our partners at Sun Country, we're able to help them offer a fare that's really competitive in all the Fargo and Ds. And lo and behold, most people in the United States make their travel purchase decisions on price and schedule. And most people are willing to spend an extra hour or two if it means they can travel more affordably. And that's been true for a long time, kind of, I think, until cost creep, starting with regional carriers. And because of our cost structure, we're able to kind of get that loop to exist again, where you can be effective in giving people the choice to spend a little bit more time and save some money.
But you don't have to. Like, so people hear the 4 hours and they'll probably freak. You don't have to. Like, if you're 4 hours away, you have a decision to make. This is one, you could drive, right? All the other options are still there, right? You're moving the people that prefer that option, and there's a lot.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I think because we've spent so long in this world of, crazy $100, whatever, $150, seat costs on 50-seat regional jets, the appreciation for how big these drive markets are has disappeared, because it's ancient history now, right? Like, again, United used to fly Oxnard to LAX 5 or 6 times a day on a 30-seat aircraft. Like, probably if you look, there hasn't been any DB1B data for Oxnard in forever. It's like a lost memory how big that market is, despite the fact that in that case the city's like double in size and the median income is up like 40 or 50% since service left. So yeah, you think of Brainerd, Minnesota, you think of a essential air service market, it must be small. It's actually not. It's the essential air service that Delta and SkyWest provide Brainerd, if you read the data, captures 9% of the drive market. And so the market's huge. You just have to have the cost structure to be able to access that market. And at $100, $150 per seat cost, you're not going to be able to shift people off the road. You're not going to be able to offer people the schedule that they want. And so I think that's probably another place, where we struggle, but we've gotten better, is just communicating to airlines, hey, there is materiality here. Like, these aren't rounding errors that you don't want to think about. These are, you look at a market like Fort Collins, right? It's many thousand people per day driving from Fort Collins to Denver. Like, if you own 100% of that, this is a big number of incremental people into your hub. This is not a rounding error.
Yeah. So I've got a question in terms of, because when I think about traveling to get to a flight, right?
Yeah.
There's always so when do I need to get in the car or get on the bus and deal with, because if you're dealing with kind of major areas like where I live here, you've got traffic to deal with. So when you guys are looking at, like, how do you figure out ultimately, okay, we can allot this amount of time to make sure that it works with that flight, right? Because if you're going to make it a seamless experience, right? Yeah. How do you take all of that into account to kind of go, all right, so this may take you an hour, or it may take you 2.5, right? Which in any major cities, right, you could definitely get to that situation, right? So how do you look at that?
Right. I think, Garrick, you may not be surprised to hear me say that I think that traffic actually presents a huge advantage for us. As Landline's leading salesperson, I guess I have to say that. But I'll tell you why it's true, and it's true because the thing that people traveling matter the thing that people traveling value more than anything is certainty, right? It's, the certainty that the airplane's going to wait for me. It's the certainty that I'm going to make my connection. And so when you have a high traffic corridor, the way that you as a driver by yourself create certainty is by adding a ton of buffer time. If you live in Ontario and you're driving to LAX, I can tell you, having formerly lived in LA, the standard deviation around that Google travel time is like an hour. It's an hour trip with an hour standard deviation. And like, if I live in Ontario, I'm just like, cool, I guess I'm just leaving, 3 hours before my flight because I have no idea.
Right.
With Landline, all of that buffer time, we basically take on the risk of the buffer time that you would give yourself. And we do that because if we're late arriving, we'll automatically rebook you on the next flight on our partner, just like any other connecting flight. It's not an ideal experience, but it is an insurance policy.
Right.
And when you book Landline, like, you're booking a set amount of travel time. And we adjust those block times for traffic. So, not every one of our Fort Collins Denver trips is the same. When we were serving Breckenridge, Denver, our eastbound Sunday night block time was a lot different than our westbound Sunday morning block time. But people actually appreciated it and purchased it because it's a guarantee. It's like, this may be a little longer than I normally would budget, but also I would never get myself to the airport 45 minutes prior to departure with skis. And so I'm buying something I know is going to actually happen. I'm guaranteed to make my connection, and I can't beat this connection time. And generally, we find that sort of combination of factors makes people pretty comfortable with what they're purchasing.
In the example, I guess the Fort Collins example you gave, there was the bus shows up, then you go through TSA in Denver. Is it the same? What's that? Once you arrive in Denver, what's that check-in process like? You go through the same, you just get at the back of the TSA line? Maybe? I'm not sure. How does that work?
Yeah, you just go through normal TSA. So your bags are gone, but you still have to go through TSA. And so I think our minimum connection time from Landline to United in Fort Collins is about 50 to 55 minutes right now, versus, in Philadelphia, where we're completely behind security, we're 35 minutes, just like any other Eagle to mainline connection. So it saves you 20 minutes and a little bit of headache, and it makes a pretty significant difference in the experience.
So your bags, you check your bags in Fort Collins to check the bags that you want to check, and those are you don't touch those again. Those are handled by either Landline or United.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So once we have your bags, they'll see you at your final destination, and that's true with all of our partner carriers.
Fascinating. And then of course you have the carry on as well as normal.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Which is one less. It's so even though as a passenger, you're looking at it going, well, I still have the same risks of whatever happens on the road could delay me, but at least there's one less thing about, at least I don't have to go and check my bag. I just have to get there, go through security, and then I'm on my way. Right. So it's still one less thing to do. And there is, look, when you break it down, right, and I think about the, when I go to DC, right, there's basically 3 ways that I can go, which is, actually, I'm sorry, there's 4 ways that I can go. Right? You've got the train, you could travel by airplane, I could drive down, or I can, take a bus down. And ultimately all of them take about the same amount of time. Right? So it's more about like going through and figuring out what's going to be the least amount of headache. And then obviously there's a cost perspective, because if you want to take the Acela from Stanford and get there a little bit sooner, it's going to cost you a lot more. Right? So there's all these things you have to consider. But it's, when you start kind of breaking it down, you can get past like what you guys are offering from the standpoint of like, oh, well, there's all these things that make it much easier for me once I get on the bus, right? It's like, and it's kind of, how do you get that message across, right?
it's a great point, and it's exactly what Courtney was saying about, not everyone's
Yeah, I
going to
said
want
it
to do
first,
it.
Garrett.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
giving Courtney a lot of credit here today.
Yeah, it feels
You
weird.
are. You are a little bit too much credit, by the way.
I
Just
gotta
a little
I
bit too
gotta
much. Yeah.
remember one of his worst Q400 market ideas or something, and then find a way.
Yeah, I
to
had a
bring
lot of
that up.
those.
But
Probably anything you have a bus on right now.
exactly. That's actually inspiration for me every day. Is I just remember
There
I
you
remember
go.
the markets that used to tell me it would work for a Q400. But I think it's the point you bring up, Garrett, which I think is interesting, is this kind of multimodal distribution idea, and it's relevant to what Courtney said because yes, not everyone is going to want to take a bus to air connection, but almost everybody, from the most experienced business traveler to the cheapest vacationer, everyone's making a trade-off for price and time. And I think what doesn't exist today that we think a lot about for the future is a distribution capability that extends. And when I say distribution capability, I mean a consumer-facing distribution capability that goes beyond the airport code and looks at, hey, I'm going from Santa Monica to Midtown Manhattan. What are all the different ways that I can
Mhm.
get there? And I'll tell you why it's interesting from my perspective is if someday in the future, and I'm not saying this will ever happen or exist. I hope it does, but someday in the future, when there's a TSA checkpoint, at the Third Street Promenade in Santa Monica, and there's one in Midtown Manhattan, and you can essentially enter the system anywhere, and you can exit the system anywhere. Do you really care if you're going Burbank JFK or LAX Newark, or what does the middle really matter to you? If you know that, hey, whatever happens, I'm going from Santa Monica to Midtown, and I now have all these choices. I can take a bus to Burbank and fly to JFK, and then take a bus to Midtown. I can take a bus to Ontario, and then take a flight to wherever, Atlantic City, whatever. This idea of distribution escaping the constraints of three-letter airport codes and actually helping people think about price and time end to end is probably essential, not only for Landline to be a really big company, but for any of the new advanced air mobility concepts. Anybody thinking about what's happening beyond the airport is going to have to figure out how to exist outside of the traditional IATA frameworks.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's probably where, and we started talking about that a little bit earlier, but that's where I think AI is going to come in, right? I mean, to be able to, as you say, offer the consumer, if to be able to go in and go an interface and go, okay, I want to go from my house to this destination. What are all my different options? And it shows you the amount of time, right? The cost, whatever, and then you can kind of pick and choose based on what works best for you, right? And that's to me, that's the evolution of where we are today, right? And how do we get there? But I'm sure AI probably has a role in that.
Yeah, I mean,
and that. Go ahead,
Courtney.
David. Sorry,
I was just gonna say
I didn't have anything to say. It was filling dead air.
Just to fill it down there. It's it's interesting how addicted we are to, or just everything is set up on these three-letter codes that mean nothing to people. But if you exist outside of the current distribution framework, I mean, it actually makes it very difficult to build a new business because people are so used to going to Google Flights or Kayak or whatever, typing in these codes. If you don't participate in that, very difficult to get traffic. It's one of the things that we see all the time is it's much easier to plug into an airport code that still has some activity versus trying to invent your own from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
So another conversation that we have often on this podcast and in the industry, and it's not something that you've brought up yet, but is definitely a part of this, is the whole sustainability
Sure.
conversation. We're talking, different, all these different ways people have had to leave the ground using more sustainable kind of propulsion systems and save money. And knowing what I know about Landline and have known for a few years, the frustration I have is why do you have to leave the ground? Like, truly, if your objective here is to be sustainable and lower cost, like, by the way, we've been doing this for years, and there's now a mechanism to accomplish this. Don't talk about 2050, right? Like, if we're talking about moving people, and this is breaking that paradigm, like you were talking about, how? I guess I'm surprised that we're as far in as we are, and there has been no mention of sustainability. I think it's fascinating to me that this isn't like, this isn't the reason. It's kind of the benefit.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting, you say that, Courtney. I think, maybe that's a good thing for me to think more about, that, this should be on the front of the front page instead of the back page, because you're totally correct. I think it all comes back to that question of, are we an airline or are we a people moving company? And if you're a people moving company that wants to be sustainable in a real tangible way, right? Not a press release way, but like a real tangible way, then Landline is probably the easiest win of all time. In the near term, we are the most practical way to be green today when it comes to moving people in the context of an airline, like, bar none. And I think maybe the other part of this, I think that gets lost in the mix, is just there's so much emphasis today on concepts that are kind of 2020, late 2020s, 2030s, 2040s concepts, because they're big and they're cool and they're science fiction-y. And sometimes it's harder to sell, like, practicality. Like, people see a really difficult problem, like making aviation more green. And the solution today might be using a diesel bus, which is not necessarily exciting, but it's practical and it's real. And it's a lot more fun to think about, like, solving it at scale 10 years from now than it is to think about how do we make an incremental step today. I mean, I don't know about you. I think the other part of it is just, like, Landline, you don't have to make a bet against physics. Like, I sincerely, I say this as a true aviation geek, and I mean it sincerely. Like, I hope that there are electric airplanes in 2027 and 2033 or whatever. And if there are, we'll probably look at flying them. But I think it's a big uphill battle, and it's a lot of money to spend on really a relatively small opportunity, relative to what we can do, which is both be a replacement for airplanes, but also take people off the road. And so I think it's tough to kind of work that balance between how can we be incremental and practical today, but also really thoughtful about the future and thinking about solving it at scale at the future.
Okay, well, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the electrically vertically oriented elephant in the room. So eVTOLs, right?
Yeah.
So 50 to 200 miles. I'd say that's right in the target range for the eVTOL market. And I'll show my hand early at not my skepticism for their ability to do that, but how big is that market?
Right.
Because you're talking a premium market. Now, no offense, I don't suspect that the same people that are going to pay a premium, and it's going to cost a premium to move through the air, whether it be electrically or not.
Right.
There probably is not that Venn diagram of eVTOL customers and Landline customers crosses, but doesn't totally eclipse.
Very small sliver.
With the
wow.
But the idea of The idea of, even overflying traffic and saying we'll have thousands of these overflying traffic. And I think it was Alan Head who first said this to me. She said, at what point are you traffic again? Right? You're just moving traffic, and now you're stuck in the same type of traffic jam.
It does have echoes. I don't know if you remember, Courtney, or Garrick, Eclipse Jet, which was going to, basically they were gonna cloud out the sun because so many eclipses would be flying all over the place.
Yes, was that part of the pogo? Right,
exactly.
Similar to the pogo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not
really that doesn't have the same ring today as it must have then. Like, no, there are gonna be so many of these. It's gonna blot out the sun. You're like,
block out the sun.
It's like it's like Sherwin-Williams paint the earth. Like, really?
Like, wow, that's
I don't think that.
That doesn't sound good.
That's a large number of eclipse jets. And are they flying in a hive formation to block out the sun, or is it more?
Right.
I have a lot of questions.
Too many questions. Yeah.
Too many questions. Yeah, better not to ask questions. I think if all I can really do is like take what I know from Landline and sort of apply it, through that lens to the eVTOLs. I think, again, what do I know about Landline? The opportunity here is a volume opportunity, right? We're competing with cars, we're competing with parking. Volume opportunities competing with another low cost option require a low cost per seat, and it's pretty difficult to get that if you're leaving the ground with 4 seats. Like no matter who you automate, whatever. I think one thing we've learned is in ultra short haul, the variable costs, the variable DOCs don't matter as much as the fixed costs. The variable DOCs are important kind of once you have everything set up. But like the marginal difference in direct operating costs doesn't, matter quite as much as how much does it just cost to set up an airport? How much does it cost to set up a station in Fort Collins, and how can we change that footprint? So I think it's going to be challenging for it to be something that's, again, clouding out the sun in any sort of form or fashion. I think you can also just look at some data. I think, if you guys are like me and you find yourself reading SEC filings on a Saturday, you can go look at Blade Air Mobility, who had an S1 a couple years ago, and in their investor presentation, I think maybe gives you the most honest view of what the cost differential of eVTOL versus helicopter is, and it's not 90%. It's 10 or 15%. It's 737 NG to 737 Max. And so if you just look at this from a network planning perspective, does a 15% trip cost reduction yield a 10,000% traffic stimulation factor? Most likely not. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think that's probably some skepticism.
But this also doesn't mean that those things don't happen, right? Like
Correct.
Blade has a business.
Correct. It's just a different business.
That's the niche.
Right. If you look at their stats today, right, they charge $150 if you're not a member, and they carry about 24,000 people from Manhattan to the 2 New York airports that they offer service to. So is it 10,000 people a day? No. Like the market size of Manhattan to the airports annually is several million people. This is going to be probably 50, 60 people, maybe 200 people a day, which is great. To your point, Courtney, totally sustainable business, can be built, but it's super different than what we're doing with buses today, which is trying to move the needle with a lot more volume. We're trying to actually, we're going to be a much larger player. And I think the other elephant in the room, right, is just the other topics you hear talked about a lot are like the Heart Aviations, right? The electric turboprops, or sustainable aviation fuel. I probably know less about those two. Maybe you guys know more. I think from my perspective, those are like 2035, 2040, 2045 solutions. And in my mind, I think there's a metric that should be used a little bit more frequently in this conversation, which is just sort of CO2 reduction yield per dollar spent. And how do we use that as a prioritization framework to say, hey, we could take a lot of CO2 out of the system for really no money by going multimodal today. It's not going to solve the whole problem like sustainable aviation fuel will do. But if we look at it just on a kind of dollars spent per unit of reduction yield today, that's clearly a path we need to be going down, and we need to take it seriously.
Yeah.
I think the challenge with that, not the challenge I have with that, but the challenge with that is if you truly minimize your dollar per CO2 ratio,
right?
It's going to be go and buy a coal plant and turn it off. Or
right.
it's probably not even going to be in aviation, which, by the way, maybe is the answer. If that's what we're solving for in sustainability, by the way,
at the end of the day,
maybe
matter,
that's
right?
the answer.
Right.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter, right? At the end, if you think about it, if it's CO2 reduction,
you could. There's a philosophical argument, right? That's like aviation is what 4% of the global carbon CO2 emissions footprint. Like, I think it's something like that. I could be wrong. Like beef and
it's like 2.5%. But I think when you consider the greenhouse, it's like 4 to 5, like of warming. Yeah.
You look at surface transportation, powering the grid, creating food. If you look at some of the other chunks on the carbon pie, it's, aviation transportation is relatively small, and it's probably the one where getting carbon out of the atmosphere faces the hardest engineering problems. Like building a battery that's going to allow a 737 like economics to exist, that's going to be a very difficult problem. Creating a sustainable aviation fuel, that's going to be a very difficult problem. Not to say in any sense that they're not worth going after. Like, I think this stuff is so fascinating, and I'm all for it. But I think in terms of, again, are you a press release carbon reducer, or are you a material carbon reducer?
That's so good.
Like, Landline is a way to be a material carbon reducer today, no exceptions. And so that's, I think that's my message on a lot of the more space age stuff.
Now, you said you guys currently today are utilizing kind of like diesel buses, right? Which is certainly right. Kind of a efficient way of running buses. Are you also looking at kind of the evolution of what you guys will use in terms of whether it's, because I think there's also, is it like propane, or is it like natural gas, or is it, kind of electric, or how do you kind of evolve your fleet to kind of also further capture that?
Yeah, I think electric motor coaches are around the corner. We don't have any purchase commitments today. The ordering and order book process in the motor coach business is a little bit different than aviation. You don't have to be quite so far ahead of yourself. But our preferred manufacturer, Prevost, I think in the next year or so we'll have a pretty compelling long-haul motor coach platform, and we will be, on that bus, as they might say, as quickly as possible. I think the variables for us are range and charge time. So, like, we need to make sure that the economics are sufficient, because when you've got 35 people on a bus, diesel's like pretty hard to beat. But if we can be part of proving the electric motor coach is a good option, we'd love to be part of that.
That's awesome.
I think it's awesome. The kind of a question that I'll ask for the listeners, and you kind of already answered it, but more explicitly I'll ask it. How can somebody book a landline flight?
A landline flight today?
Yeah.
You basically you have to go through one of our airline partners. So You're going to the airline's website and you're booking it like any other connecting flight. We do in some
So it's
cases.
very similar, if I could interrupt. Like, if I were to ask, how can somebody book a Republic Airways flight? Well,
Right.
you go to United, you go to American, right?
That's exactly right. We do have our own direct distribution channel in some cases, just to pick up extra demand. It's a great marketing tool to get, people
Interesting.
in places where there hasn't been airline distribution in a while. You can get them on the bus. You can educate them about how to get a better experience next time. But most of our traffic is going to be exactly what you just said. How do you book a Republic Airlines flight? You book it through one of their partners. So.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
I think we're getting to that 90-minute plus kind of time frame. And before Courtney starts thinking about other stuff to ask, and then we go for
only
another
90 more minutes to go.
We haven't really talked about AI yet, Courtney.
I know. There's so much to talk about.
I tried to get you guys going, but you didn't bite. I was trying to get there, but stuff. Yeah, I know. But this has been really, really fun to chat with you and kind of see all the success you've had and all the great ideas that you've had to be able to implement that. So definitely thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. We'll certainly look forward to seeing what else you're going to be doing, because I'm sure you guys are going to be doing tons. And as people kind of pick up on the fact that what you're able to offer, that should give you some additional great traction, right? Because I mean, like, how would you, as an airline, why wouldn't you be thinking about this? That to me is just, if you're not, then you're behind the curve.
I'm going to throw out there a challenge, and I won't name the carrier, but if there is landline service to, I don't know, say Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport, Garrick will go on that. He will take that, and he will finally break a streak of not being at the Atlanta airport.
I don't know about that.
That's all.
That's all the reality that we need. That's everything right there. That's enough.
That's enough to do it, huh?
Point. Yeah, exactly. Hey guys, this has been so much fun. Obviously, really appreciate you having me on. So I feel like I've just been hanging out, talking shop. So I guess that's the point.
That's the jam.
That's the point. Yeah, I know. That's what makes it so much fun. And look, we love it because we get to chat with people like you that are doing some really interesting stuff. And it's still aviation. It's still right, and yet it's so different as well, right? And that's the great part. So thank you for doing what you do.
Absolutely, guys. Great to see you both. I have to give you guys one compliment. The opening credits music is phenomenal.
Just one?
I was going to say, I'm like, wow, we're really...
This is the only...
Okay, well,
there
nice
will be
to see you, David.
There will be no others. It's great. It just makes me feel like wow, something's about to go down. Like I don't know what. I don't know what the podcast has in store today, but it's going down.
Yeah,
I drive a little faster.